Welcome to Mountain Strong. Today I am at Earthquake Park, and if you've been following along in the videos for this week, I was at Earthquake Park yesterday. We actually watched the sunset together in the last video, and we're back here for not quite the sunrise. I wanted to get a little bit of sleep, but we're here early in the morning, and as you can see, the sun has already been up for a couple of hours, and that's just the nature of the Alaskan summer. You have very, very late sunsets and early sunrises, and if you go far enough north in Alaska, some people don't realize how big Alaska is. You go far enough north and there are certain places where the sun doesn't set at this time of year, but not usually places that most of us live. Anyway, today we're going to be having a look together at Psalm 65. I was having a chuckle to myself and very thankful it is the morning. Last night I was getting totally ate up by mosquitoes, but this morning the only reminder of the mosquitoes really from last night, at least how thick they were, was I opened up my Bible and I saw that there was a dead mosquito that was in between the pages there from what we looked at last night. But anyway, today we're going to look at Psalm 65 together. Let's go ahead and read. Praise is due to you, O God in Zion, and to you shall vows be performed. O you who hear prayer, to you shall all flesh come. When iniquities prevail against me, you atone for our transgressions. Blessed is the one you choose and bring near to dwell in your courts. We shall be satisfied with the goodness of your house, the holiness of your temple. By awesome deeds you answer us with righteousness, O God of our salvation, the hope of all the ends of the earth and of the farthest seas. The one who by his strength established the mountains, being girded with might, who stills the roaring of the seas, the roaring of their waves, the tumult of the peoples, so that those who dwell at the ends of the earth are in awe at your signs. You make the going out of the morning and the evening to shout for joy. You visit the earth and water it. You greatly enrich it. The river of God is full of water. You provide their grain, for so you have prepared it. You water its furrows abundantly, settling its ridges, softening it with showers, and blessing its growth. You crown the year with your bounty. Your wagon tracks overflow with abundance. The pastures of the wilderness overflow. The hills gird themselves with joy. The meadows clothe themselves with flocks. The valleys deck themselves with grain. They shout and sing together for joy. This psalm reminds us of a simple fact. You really can't reflect enough on the blessings of God. And how appropriate it is that we've had the opportunity in these videos, albeit not necessarily by my design, to have a look at the sunset and the sunrise. You see, the psalm praises, among other things, the going out of the morning and the evening, the beginning of the day in beauty, the end of the day in beauty, and beauty all in between. As the psalmist reflects upon what God has provided him, he provides a list of blessings for us to think about and to do as he encourages us to do in that first verse. He says in verse 1, "Praise is due to you, O God in Zion, and to you shall vows be performed." As we think about our God, he is a God worthy of praise. He's a God worthy of our worship, but he's also a God worthy of us keeping our vows to or our promises to. He's a God that we should serve and that we should try to be as dependable toward as he is toward us. And so all these blessings that are mentioned in this text remind us of the faithfulness of God and how important it is to be faithful to him. He starts out with a list of spiritual blessings there in verses 2 through 5. He talks about how God hears prayers. And from whom does he hear prayers? Only from national Israel here from the Old Testament point of view? No, it says he hears the prayers of all flesh. God's ears are open to all, even to Cornelius, who was searching for the truth and wanted to obey God. God had his ears open and provided him what he needed so that he had the opportunity to obey the truth. And of course, if you're not familiar with that, that's Acts chapter 10, and Cornelius was a Gentile outside of a relationship with God, but God was able to break down those barriers and bring him into Christ. He hears the prayers of all flesh. Not only does he hear the prayers of all flesh, but as relates to sin, while we are still mired in iniquity, caught up in the sins that have overtaken us, God moves first. He moves to make atonement. He moves to atone for our transgression. Not only does he pay the price for our sin, but he also moves toward us while we are yet in sin. And reminds you of Romans chapter 5, doesn't it? As you think about verse 4, he not only forgives us of our sin, He invites us into intimacy. The psalmist reflects upon how blessed it is to be the one who God chooses and who is brought near to be able to dwell in His courts, satisfied in the goodness of the house, the holiness of the temple. And you think about that and you realize something. God isn't the one necessarily who chooses, because in prospect He chooses all. And I think of Revelation chapter 22, the way our Bible closes out, and the invitation that is given to all who hear, that they may come and drink of the water of life freely. The blessing of God is that He is not exclusive, and He desires the fellowship of all. And in verse 5, His awesome righteous deeds are always being declared to us through His Word, and no doubt through our experiences in life as we achieve victory over sin and as we enjoy the fellowship of God's people. Righteousness is experienced by those who serve Him. He says, to the ends of the earth the hope of God travels. And you think about the farthest place that you could be in sin, the farthest place you could be geographically. It doesn't matter. As far away as you are from God, there is hope for you. There is the ability for you to recover, the ability for you to come back, and the ability for you to be saved. And so spiritual blessings. But then notice how he transitions and talks about physical blessings. And of course, he's thinking about agricultural blessings and thinking about the world in which he lives. And, you know, we think about the country in which we live, the United States, and every country really has something to be thankful for. The United States, we've got our purple mountains majesty, and above the fruited plains, you know. That's exactly what he's talking about in this psalm. And rather than just simply pausing on those things, think about the one who gave them. That song actually encourages us, our national song encourages us to reflect upon the fact that God has blessed us. And the psalmist is teaching us to do the same thing. He says in verse 6 that God is the one who made the mountains, these glorious and beautiful things that we reflect upon, but also that are so important to our life. You know, snow falls in the mountains, and that water melts in the summertime, and it comes down and it feeds us. That happens in Israel, that happens in the United States. God is the one who designed it that way and allowed for provision and beauty in the mountains. He not only makes the mountains, but he calms the seas. And I love how the transition is made in verse 7 from the idea of calming the seas to calming the peoples. He's the one who provides peace in a land. The tumult of the people are calmed as he calms the seas. In other words, he calms both with the same might and the same power. He is able to make peace. In verse 8, he reflects upon the sunrise and the sunset, as we've already mentioned, and again, how beautiful those things are. Those who dwell at the end of the earth are in awe of God's signs, all that he shows in the world around. In verse 9, he talks about water being provided and grain being provided. And in verse 10, how God has allowed for growth in our lives. He waters abundantly us, softening the ground with showers, blessing it, he says, and its growth. God has designed it to where the earth is just this wonderful habitation, and how it's designed to assist us in what really was meant to be a toilsome task. You think about the burden that was placed upon mankind there in Genesis chapter 3, and how mankind was supposed to labor with his hands and in the sweat of his brow receive from the ground. God could have made it a whole lot more difficult than he did when you think about the farming process. In verse number 11, there's a beautiful picture of the wagon tracks of God overflowing with abundance. And I get this picture from that of God proceeding forward. And as we follow him, we experience greater and greater degrees of abundance. As that old song, I think from the 70s, says, sweeter gets the journey day by day. In verses 12 and 13, he concludes by talking about the fact that the land is full of joy, full of provision. We experience God's care constantly. We need psalms like this to cause us to pause and reflect upon the blessings of God. I spoke too soon about those mosquitoes, but we need to be able to pause and think about the blessings of God. And the reason we need to do so is not just because he is worthy of our praise, but as this verse actually opened up, he's worthy of us keeping our promises. You remember in verse 1, it says, "To you shall vows be performed." And you say, well, what vows have I made to God? When you made that confession before witnesses that you believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, you were not just stating a fact, and you were not just describing a belief. You were describing the fact that you were pledging for that to be true in your life, that Jesus was the Son of God, that implies, and is the Son of God, that implies that you're going to serve Him, you're going to follow Him, and you're going to behave in accordance with His will. You remember how in the book of Hebrews it talks about holding fast our profession or our confession. We have to hold that fast because we've made a vow, we've made a promise, we need to keep it. And again, God has been faithful towards us. It's only reasonable that we would be faithful towards Him. I hope that this psalm is a blessing to you as it has been to me, and I hope that you'll pause today and think about the blessings of God that He has showered upon you. May God bless you today.